Chapter 5 Summary The Introduction to Camp. Percy woke up in pieces. The first time he drifted away, people were arguing over him about a quest of all things. He hadn't caught much, only that it was between the girl he'd run into and a familiar person who smelt of horses and leather. The next time, it was to the heavy smell of wine and grapes. This person was muttering in Greek, something about hearing his teeth chattering from the house. He had been freezing. His heated sweater had gotten dirty, and they had only wrapped him in one blanket after he'd been changed. This person, whoever they were, had returned his sweater, dry and warm, and had dropped a few more blankets on him before they left. The third time, he woke up completely and startled Grover out of his chair. "Percy!" his friend cried in joy and nearly started actually crying. "Oh, thank the gods!" "Grover?" His voice cracked. Grover grabbed a drink with a straw and held it to his lips. It tasted like his mom's blue chocolate chip cookies. The thought had his heart stuttering. "What?" "It's nectar," Grover explained. "It's good, right? It heals demigods, but you can't drink much or you'll combust." Yeah, he did feel better. Still a little cold, but that was normal. "I'm guessing we made it?" He finally worked out. "This is Camp Half-Blood?" "Yeah. Are you good enough to stand?" "There are some people who want to talk to you." He didn't really feel like talking, but wallowing wasn't any better. He pushed himself up, taking it slow. Grover was at his side in a blink of an eye, hovering as he got his balance. His friend cleared his throat. "I got your bag. And this." It was a minotaur's horn. It had been cleaned, thankfully, and for something that looked so innocent, even the thought of it had him clenching his teeth in anger. "It's yours," Grover explained. "A spoils of war by right." "Because I killed him?" Grover confirmed and led him out of the infirmary room. He felt more energized as they moved around the house, his limbs warming from the simple action. They rounded the porch, approaching a man wearing a garish leopard-patterned Hawaiian shirt sitting at the table. The shirt seemed to flicker in the light, trying to decide whether it wanted to stay a shirt or reveal itself to be a long leopard pelt wrapped around the man. His body did the same, between an older adult and a young, healthy one. He had a red nose, big, watery eyes, and curly hair so black it was almost purple. He smelt like wine and grapes, though only one of those things were in sight. The wine smell was also muted, sore, and almost pained. "You were the one who helped me in the infirmary," Percy blinked. The man looked up, eyes like swirling pools of red-purple wine. "Thank you." The god huffed. "No idea what you're talking about." "You smell like wine and grapes," Percy said, almost accusingly. "My nose doesn't lie." Grover hissed and nudged him in the ribs. He frowned, batting away Grover's hand. Percy?" Grover started stuttering. "This is Dionysius," Percy finished. "The camp director, Mr. D. How did you—" Grover looked stunned and extremely panicked. "You don't smell human," Percy told the surprised god. "I wasn't kidding. Like wine, grapes, and ivy. Could only be." Dionysius responded in amusement. "Ah, he is awake." "Chiron!" Grover exclaimed in relief, subtly trying to drag Percy closer to the half-horse man jumping just off the porch. Percy only glanced away once to put a voice to the face, then returned to his staring contest with Dionysius. "Mr. Burner," he greeted. "Hello, Percy," Mr. Burner said cheerfully. "You must be a little surprised." "Only somewhat." He was more curious about how Dionysius could see without pupils. He shrugged. I am a centaur. My name is Chiron. Ah, Percy said distractedly. The wine spilled from Dionysius's eyes like red-purple tears. When it ran off his face, it sizzled in the air and disappeared. Where did it go? The hero trainer? Exactly. Silence descended. Well then, Chiron said, I think it's time for the tour. Come along, Percy. He nodded, finally peeling his eyes away. I like your crown, by the way, Percy said offhandedly. Everyone froze. What? Chiron asked after a moment. His crown, he gestured to the god, where a lovely crown of ivy and grapes framed his black curls. What? Grover bleated. Not a crown, Dionysius interrupted their repetitive conversation, looking at him through squinted eyes. Similar, though, it's a laurel wreath. Well, I like it, Percy said. It suits you. He particularly liked the golden red thread strewn around it, tangled in his white goat-like horns. He didn't mention that, though. They were all looking at him weirdly already. Anyway, Chiron cleared his throat. I think the video will be insufficient, considering the circumstances. Come, Percy. They left the bemused god on the porch, though Grover was called to stay behind. Now normally, Chiron started, campers wear the orange camp t-shirt, but Dionysius informed us of your condition, so the sweater will suffice until we can find something more suitable. Condition? An interesting choice of words. I have it on under, Percy said, but yeah, I would appreciate keeping this sweater. I'm not good at staying warm. Will Grover be okay? He looked like he was going to have a meltdown. Chiron looked like he was considering something, but eventually shook his head and gestured to the volleyball pit they passed to make sure he did, in fact, see it. Dionysius isn't really mad at him. He just hates his job. He's been, grounded, I guess you could say. He can't stand waiting around centuries before he's allowed to go back to Olympus. Why was he grounded? Mr. D offended his father a while back. Took a fancy to a wood nymph who had been declared off limits. First time, simple prohibition. The second, well, he was sent here to watch over the camp. Be a better influence, he was told. Percy snorted. His dad said that? He asked, pointing to the sky. Mr. Lightning, the one who was at fault for like half the stuff that went down in Greek mythology? There was an exasperated but vindictive yell of, "Thank you!" from the direction of the big house, carried by the wind. Chiron's lips twitched, but he urged Percy to be more polite for the sake of his continued survival. Percy grumbled as they continued the tour. Most of the campers were older than him. Most of the stray friends he saw were bigger than Grover, and everyone was wearing the orange Camp Half-Blood shirt Percy had underneath his sweater. They also all turned to look at him as he passed, staring and pointing and whispering poorly. That's him, one hissed. The one who killed the Minotaur. He did not like the staring, though his own eyes lingered on a few campers who seemed to have less than human features like him. One had owl-like eyes, a piercing silver that seared to the bones. Another had horns and a tail, but they weren't strier. He wondered if anyone else had scales and webbed hands, if anyone else had trouble keeping warm and needed water to breathe right. The big house turned out to be an apt name, he noticed when they got out of its shadow. The farmhouse was 4 stories tall, sky blue, with white trim, like a seaside resort. Something in the utmost window moved, but when he focused, all there was swinging curtains. "What's up there?" he asked Chiron, gesturing. The centaur's smile faded when he followed. "Just the attic." "Does somebody live up there?" "No," he said with finality, like Percy's mom did when they broached a topic they had to be careful with. "Not a single living thing." So, something dead, Percy thought. That was an odd choice of words. "Come along, Percy." Chiron said, his light-hearted tone now a little forced. Lots to see. They walked through the strawberry fields, Chiron explaining the importance of the strawberries in maintaining camp expenses. And the strawberries take almost no effort. Mr. D had that effect on fruit-bearing plants. He further explained, though it works best with wine grapes. But no wine, Percy pointed out, and Chiron nodded. So no wine grapes. Have you ever thought of expanding to other fruits and vegetables? That would require permission from those on Olympus, and they have bigger things to worry about. Bigger things than making sure their kids don't starve? He asked sarcastically. You would think, another voice interjected, tone warm with amusement. He turned and came face to face with another girl, a good few inches taller than him. She had slightly pink skin and freckles, who obviously spent a lot of time outside. Her brown hair was pulled over her shoulder into one thick braid. She wore a flower wreath of wheat and poppy on her head. Dirt was caked up her arm and legs. She smelled like wheat, but it was padded by a richer smell, like soil ready for a new planting. Her brown eyes reminded him of the earth beneath them. For one slight moment their eyes locked. Something passed between them, an understanding that they could feel the earth turning underneath their feet, that they could hear the hissing of snakes crawling below the surface. She smiled, teeth bared to reveal fangs. He smiled back, a gaping maw of rows of sharp teeth. Children, Chiron said sternly. They blinked back to normal. Katie Gardner, the girl introduced. Welcome to Camp Half-Blood. Percy Jackson, thanks. They kept moving, Katie waving by and returning to picking strawberries. Grover won't get into much trouble, will he? Percy asked, careful not to step on the line of bugs the stars were guiding out of the fields. I mean, he was a good protector. If he hadn't gotten to us before the bowl, it would have gone much worse. Chiron sighed. Grover has big dreams, perhaps bigger than is reasonable. To reach his goal, he must first demonstrate great courage by succeeding as a keeper, finding a new camper and bringing them safely to Camp Half-Blood. Well, Percy looked over himself. I'm here and still in one piece, so he did that. I might agree with you, Chiron said, but it's not my place to judge. Dionysius and the Council of Cloven Elders must decide. I'm afraid they might not see this assignment as a success. After all, Grover lost you in New York in the first place. Then there is the unfortunate fate of your mother. And the fact that Grover was unconscious when you dragged him, injured, might I add, over the property line. The council might question whether this shows any courage on Grover's part. The New York thing was on me. He'll get a second chance, won't he? Chiron winced. I'm afraid that was Grover's second chance, Percy. The council was not anxious to give him another either, after what happened the first time 5 years ago. Olympus knows of him, and that means they think any children he finds are at more risk. I advised him to wait longer before trying again. He's still so small for his age. How old is he? Oh, 28. Percy bit his lip. I'm guessing strayers mature at a slower rate. Half as fast as humans. That said, Grover is a late bloomer, even by strayer standards, and not yet very accomplished at woodland magic. Alas, he was anxious to pursue his dream. Perhaps now he will find some other career. That's not fair, Percy protested. What exactly happened the first time? Was it really so bad? Chiron looked away and ushered him along to the woods, which smelled like multiple things that weren't in any way friendly. The woods are stocked if you care to try your luck, but go armed. Oh, how lovely. Yeah, he could tell. Capture the flag is Friday night. I don't suppose you have your own sword and shield, so I will visit the armory later. Percy wrinkled his nose at the thought of armor. It sounded like a great way to slow him down. He preferred moving over planting his feet. They passed the archery range, the canoeing lake, the stables, the javelin range, the sing-along amphitheater, and the arena. before getting to the large pavilion framed by Grecian columns on the hill overlooking the sea. There were a dozen stone picnic tables scattered about, with specific symbols carved into the center of each. "There are a lot more gods than 12, he commented, observing the symbols of a scythe and wheat ear that marked the table of Demeters. "Why only the main ones? Actually, where is Hades' table? He's one of the main ones." Chiron shook his head. "Do watch whose name you say," he warned. "Names have power, and we do not want to draw any unwanted attention. As for the tables, we only have the 12 Olympians, the gods who stay on Olympus. The Lord of the Underworld is only ever a guest." The wind carried a slight honeysuckle smell to it. "Only a guest?" Percy asked, still confused. "But he's the eldest son. Why would he be a guest in what's supposed to be his own home?" "I guess the stories do say he usually stays in the underworld, but still. And what about, the hearth? Does she also not have a table?" Chiron looked at him closely, a look familiar from their time in class together, like Percy had gone off script. "You always ask the most interesting questions," the centaur finally said thoughtfully. "Curious. And worry not about Hestia. She is always with us at the campfire. There is no place of greater honor for her than the place where we all come together." Percy nodded, but he was still discomforted by the lack of space for Hades. Not honoring a specific god sounded like a disaster waiting to happen. Finally, they approached the cabins, nestled in the woods by the lake. A collection of 12 buildings in the shape of a U, with 2 at the base and 5 in a row on each side. A soccer field-sized common area made up the middle, dotted with Greek structures, fountains, flower beds, and other outdoor activities. In the direct center was a large stone-lined fire pit. A young girl in a red cloak was tending the flames. She smelled like the warm fire she tended, roasted marshmallows and cookies. Percy smiled at her when she looked up, waving. Her face softened, her eyes pools of cozy fire. She waved back, then was gone when the smoke shifted. Each cabin was distinct, bustling with activity, and they all gave off whiffs of different smells. Outside each was a decorated sign designating the cabin number. Above each door there was the same symbol etched into the tables, designating which cabin belonged to who. Even without them, Percy could have taken a good guess. Cabin 1 and 2 were cold and lifeless, built like Greek temples. Cabin 1 was the largest of the bunch. It had lightning etched into the gold door, holographic, so any angle you looked at it, it looked like lightning was streaking across the surface. The other one had garlands of flower crawling up the main pillars, a sort of elegance attached to the soft golden door. But any beauty was sucked away by their emptiness. They looked untouchable and unfriendly, proven by the untouched grass cut in front of them. Like everyone made an effort to go as far around as they could. It was sad. The others had more character, each built with their divine parent in mind. It was Poseidon's which drew his eyes, though he was quick to look elsewhere when Chiron looked at him for a reaction. "Each god gets a cabin?" he asked, simply so Chiron would get the hint. "Indeed," he said, gesturing to the 2 at the end. "Zeus's and Hera's. Each cabin holds the children the god has claimed." "Then what about the children who are unclaimed?" They approached cabin 11, the smell of strawberries growing heavy. "Hermes?" he asked, taking in the cabin. It was the only one that looked like an actual summer camp, complete with the cracked windows and creaky wooden floorboards. The brown paint was peeling, and the caduceus over the doorway looked about ready to fall off the wall. It was sad, but in a different way. The girl he ran into, the one who smelled like a type of bird and olive tree, was reading a book on the cabin steps, obviously waiting for them. "Annabeth," Chiron greeted. "I have a master's archery class at noon. Would you take Percy from here?" "Yes, sir," she said, closing the book. She looked at Percy critically, as if he were a science project. Cabin 11, Chiron told him, gesturing towards the doorway. Make yourself at home. Inside, it was packed with people, both boys and girls, way more than a number of bunk beds. Sleeping bags were scattered all over the floor. It looked like a gym where the Red Cross had set up an evacuation settlement. Chiron didn't go with him, being too tall for the doorway, but when the campers saw him, they all stood and bowed respectfully. Well then, Chiron said, good luck, Percy. I'll see you at dinner. He galloped away towards the archery range. When Percy turned back, all the kids were staring at him. He blinked like a frog just because he could, and that broke the tension when a few of them ducked their heads and laughed. Annabeth announced, Percy Jackson, meet Cabin 11. He waved. Regular or undetermined? Someone asked. Undetermined, Annabeth answered. He was only a little bothered by the groans. How welcoming. Now, campers, a guy a little older than the rest came forward. That's what we're here for. Welcome, Percy. You can have the spot on the floor right over there. The guy was tall and muscular, somewhere around 19. He had short, cropped, sandy hair, a friendly smile, and blue eyes. A thick, white scar ran from beneath his right eye to his jaw, like an old knife slash. He smelled like a blast of wind on a clear day, carrying the faint smell of strawberries and dirt. Percy hummed, taking in Luke's blue eyes again. Funny, he recognized that shade. This is Luke, Annabeth said, her voice doing that funny thing girls at school did when talking about the person they liked. He glanced at her, catching a mild blush, and nodded. He's your counselor for now. Until I get claimed? You catch on fast. Since you're undetermined, they don't know what cabin to put you in, so you come here. Cabin 11 takes all newcomers, all visitors. Naturally we would. Hermes, our patron, is the god of travels. He looked at the small spot on the floor they'd given him, then over at the other campos all smushed in. He vaguely remembered that Hermes was also the god of thieves, and he recognized that look in some of the campers' eyes. I mean, I guess that makes sense, and it's nice of Hermes and all, but the camp can't just build an unclaimed cabin? Percy asked, confused. Luke's lip twitched, and Annabeth looked at him weirdly, her head tilted at an odd angle. We have to get permission for that, Luke explained. Is there anything we don't have to get permission for? He asked, point blank, and Luke laughed. Not much, he said, but you seem to be a person of change, so maybe we'll find out. Oh, they would. Percy was not going to sleep on the floor for however long he was here, whether that meant building an unclaimed cabin by himself out of sticks, just sleeping outside in the lake every night, or going to Olympus and yelling at his father himself. He did not care. Luke laughed once more at whatever expression he was making. He followed Annabeth out when she tugged him, letting go the moment he winced. Don't worry about it, he murmured. Just need some water. She led him to the lake, where they sat on a pier and Percy stuck his feet in the water. She watched him do this closely, and he could see the gears in her head turning. You've been watching me, he finally broke the silence. Any reason? You're incredibly lucky, she said. You know how many kids at this camp wish they had your chance? His nose wrinkled. To get killed? To kill the Minotaur? What do you think we're training for? Survival in an obvious, dangerous world? She talked over him, going on about how they couldn't leave camp without permission, how they were stuck here, how they could never gain glory. I'm not sure I'm interested in this glory if it involves my loved ones getting hurt, he murmured under his breath, kicking the water slightly. He smiled down at the naiads that swam close, peering up at him with curious eyes. When he tuned back in, she seemed to have hit the bottom of her spiral. I'm unnatural, she muttered, and Percy bit his lip, swallowing the thickness in his throat. Unnatural? Huh. Aren't we all? He asked. She scoffed. I'm more unnatural. There was a flutter behind her, gentle enough to miss if you weren't paying attention. Owl feathers were attached to her shoulders and back, brown at the tips and fading to white in a striped pattern towards her back. Not quite wings, but the makings of one. Whoa, Percy breathed, and then they were gone. Hey, wait, no, those were cool. He grinned, yanking up a sleeve to show the purple, blue, green, iridescent scales down his arm. Her eyes widened at the sight of them, mouth opening slightly. They get pretty dry often, he explained. It's why I need to get some water earlier. If I'm not careful, they dry out, get itchy, and start to peel. Like the world's worst sunburn. She was still gaping. She looked like Percy had just tilted her world on its side. Your wings are really cool, though. Do you think you'll be able to fly someday? That knocked her out of it. She swallowed, maybe? Can't wait to see you. He nodded like it was a surety. I bet it'll be an amazing sight. She huffed, finally collecting herself. You're a lot like her, she said, shaking her head. Who? A girl I once knew. She did that too. You feel like her in a way. Did what? Annabeth glanced at him, and he cheekily smiled back. That, she muttered, steamrolling. You mean not letting you put yourself down with words? Yeah, I do that a lot. Don't see the point, and you look smart enough to know it. Her face scrunched, and she got up and patted herself off. Percy let her go, knowing she wouldn't go far. He recognized that look. She needed a moment to think, and she needed it alone. Instead, he turned his eyes back to the naiads. Would you mind watching this for me? He asked one of them. He held out the Minotaur's horn. I don't want it stolen by someone. I'll make sure to repay you later. She took it, placing it within the basket she was wearing, and Percy waved them goodbye as he got up and followed after Annabeth. He ran into another girl first, with 2 other girls with her, all smelling of blood and dog fur. They sneered down at him, the one in the middle snarling. What do we have here, a newbie? Bullies identified. Hi, he greeted. I'm Percy Jackson. Clarice, Annabeth interrupted, appearing at Percy's side. Why don't you go polish your spear or something? Sure, Miss Princess, the big girl said. So I can run you through with it on Friday night. Percy sidestepped out of their line of sight. Go to the crows, Annabeth said, glaring. You don't stand a chance. We'll pulverize you, Clarice answered, but her eyes twitched. She turned towards Percy. We got an initiation ceremony for newbies, Percy. Percy. Whatever. Come on, I'll show you. Show was a very nice word for drag. Percy rolled his eyes when they approached the bathroom, willingly falling limp to make their journey as difficult as he could. He regained his footing the moment they crossed into the bathroom, planting his feet as they approached the stalls. Absolutely not. Percy reached out for that familiar feeling as Clarice barked out, trying to force him into the stall. The knot in his gut unraveled slightly and the toilet exploded. The water launched itself upward, arching around him to slam into Clarice and her little gang. It sent them sprawling across the bathroom floor and out the door, soaking wet. A thought from him, and it parted around Annabeth as well, sparing her the toilet water experience. Anyways, he said in the quiet, the water cutting abruptly off. That was fun. He walked out, Annabeth on his heels. How did you? He shrugged. Outside, Clarice and her friends were sprawled in the mud, and a bunch of other campers had gathered to gawk. Clarice's poofy curls were flattened across her face, and he really didn't envy the amount of care it was going to take to get rid of the smell of sewage. She gave him a look of pure hatred. You're dead, new boy. You're totally dead. He smiled, teeth gleaming in the light. I'd close that mouth of yours, he said sweetly, unless you want to gargle toilet water again. Her friends held her back from the weak lunge she took. They dragged her all the way back to cabin 5, kicking and screaming. Annabeth hadn't stopped staring. Something on my face? He asked. You've got that thinking face on. I'm thinking, she said, that I want you on my team for Capture the Flag. Subtle. He grinned anyway.